Deep in the South African wild, the black mamba snake is one of the deadliest in the world. The snake's fangs act like a hypodermic needle, injecting venom quickly and efficiently. It only takes 2 drops of venom to spread toxic poison throughout the bloodstream. Luckily, if you act quickly, there is a cure and you can survive. First, a tourniquet is used to stop the spread of the poison through the body. Next, oxygen and respiratory support is given because the heart and lungs are weakened from the spread of toxins. Finally, the antidote to the venom is injected directly into the bloodstream to neutralize and eventually overcome the poison that is being spread. Now, while few of us will actually ever encounter a black mamba, maybe even more dangerous are the toxins we encounter every day. Navigating our current reality can feel like a dangerous and terrifying jungle full of snakes ready to bite. And good news is that while deadly, there is actually a cure to everything toxic in our lives. An antidote within our reach that will restore health and vibrancy to our minds and hearts. Just like treating a deadly mamba bite, we can cut off the poison of polarization that is penetrating our souls by turning away from sin and towards the cure of forgiveness. When our bodies and souls are shutting down under the stress of daily life, we can fill our lungs with life-sustaining support from the Bible, the Word of God. And when it feels like our broken hearts will never heal and there is no hope, we can inject ourselves with the truth of God, the antidote that will neutralize the poison affecting our entire world.
Howdy everybody, Pastor Nithin here. I just want to welcome you to City Alliance Church. If you're watching us on YouTube, smash the subscribe button. That way you are always going to get our best content on a regular basis. And guys, I am so excited because today we are kicking off a brand new series called How to Overcome a Toxic Culture. And I've got to admit, this is a series that was actually inspired by another church. It's a church out in Cincinnati. They're called Crossroads. And I know many of you guys that are watching, you love to listen to different pastors and preachers on your podcast route. So I got to give credit to the Crossroads team, the incredible leadership of Pastor Brian Tome. If you're looking for a podcast to listen to, Brian's got lots of great stuff. Also, Pastor Chuck Mingo, he is phenomenal, as well as Pastor Allie Patterson. They're an incredible team. They're an incredible church, and I know they can encourage you just as they have encouraged me. But here's why I want to talk about this, guys, because we live in a toxic world. I mean, if you doubt it, just turn on the news. Or don't even do that. Just flip through your phone, flip through Facebook or any kind of social media that you do. You will just get a sense of the toxicity. We breathe it in and we breathe it out. It is everywhere, and it literally comes up from the world we live in. In fact, Ephesians tells us that nature of the world is a pretty dark place. But really, I want to go to a guy named John. John is actually one of Jesus' OG disciples, one of his core group. And John says this about the world. It says this in 1 John 2:16. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, comes not from the Father, but from the world. Now, I want to make a clarification here. By world, we're not talking about, sunsets and rainbows and beautiful hikes and, being out in the Susquehanna Valley. No. The world in Scripture has a very particular meaning. It's talking about the structures and systems that are set up by sinful, broken people. The Bible teaches that all of us are under the power of sin. What do? We come together and we build societies, we build culture. And what happens is we actually bake in our own sinful prejudices and biases into the cultures and the societies that we create. And we see so much inequality and so much brokenness because of that. And so really, out of all of this brokenness, all of these toxins rise up, and we live in this broken world. And the problem is not just that the toxins are out there, they can actually get into us. Whether you're a Christ follower or not, these toxins can actually be deadly to your soul, your spirit, and your body as well. I sometimes think that one of the greatest gifts God has given us is the natural world. Because in the natural world, we are able to learn truths that actually inform our spiritual realities. They help us understand spiritual realities better. And I think one of those creatures is this guy right here. Ooh, he's kind of scary. We have a viper here, and I know it's kind of intimidating. If you look at him, he's got these red beady eyes, and he's got this slow kind of creepy movement, and he's got that tongue that kind of goes out there, and he's kind of tasting the air, things like that. Most of us, when we see a snake, we get a little freaked out, don't we? And especially a guy like this, because he is a viper. This is the kind of snake where if he bites you, he will inject venom into your body, and it has the ability to destroy you literally from the inside out. But like I said before, I think things in the natural world have a lot to teach us about the things of God. And so when I wanted to learn more about venomous snakes and what their venom can actually do, what their toxicity can do in us or any kind of mammal, I had to go to the experts. So guys, here in our neck of the woods, there's a place called Reptile Land. It's run by a guy named Clyde. And so I went to Clyde and said, Clyde, you got to teach me a little bit more about these snakes. And so I did an interview with Clyde. I'm going to share with you in a moment. Now, bear with us. There's a roaring triceratops in the background, but I'm sure that you'll pick up some of the truths that Clyde's going to be laying down. Check this out. Hey guys, I am here with Clyde Peeling, the man, the myth, the legend. How you doing today, Clyde?
I'm doing well.
Can you give us maybe a little bit of a snippet of how Reptile Land started?
Started as a hobby when I was 12. I think I had a pretty good idea what I wanted to do with my life, and came out of the Air Force in 1964 and started in building Reptile Land, and we've been building ever since.
I'm a big fan of poisonous snakes. What kind of poisonous snakes do you have here? And on a scale from 1 to 10, how lethal are they?
The toxicity of venom is not always necessarily, it doesn't always make the animal the most dangerous.
Sure.
I would say probably of all the animals we have here, the king cobra is the most dangerous. They carry a large quantity of venom, and it's a neurotoxin which attacks the nervous system essentially, and it will basically shut down your motor system, and eventually you'll die. Cobra bites, sometimes they're not terribly painful initially, until you can no longer breathe.
Right.
But with the hemotoxins, it's a lot of pain, swelling, discoloration. I was bitten by a western diamondback rattlesnake. In my case, the snake bit me 3 times here and created a big blister, swelled up the arm, across the neck and chest, finally stopped swelling a day later over here. It looked like somebody had taken a blowtorch.
So what is the cure? How do you treat people when they get bitten by
Again, it depends on the snake, but if you get bitten by a rattlesnake, for example, here in Pennsylvania, the old protocol was you would cut it and suck the venom out. Well, that very often the cutting does as much damage, and maybe even increases the ability of the venom in the tissues to spread. So that's no longer recommended. You might get some value out of keeping, let's say you were bitten on the hand, keeping your hand cool. I wouldn't pack it in ice because you may end up getting tissue damage from frostbite. But until you get to a hospital, that's one way to slow down the spread of the venom. Now, in the case of a cobra bite, your emergency treatment might be a compress, like an ace bandage. And then upon reaching medical attention, you would get serum as well.
Well, hey, Clyde, thank you so much for giving us some of your time, for sharing Reptile Land with us today. I really appreciate meeting you.
Thank you.
Hey, can we hear it for Clyde and the team at Reptile Land? They are awesome. Like, I appreciate their hospitality. They showed us around. And Clyde really taught us some interesting things. And I want to capture something, crystallize it here. He talked about these 2 snakes and their 2 venom. He talked about a king cobra. When a king cobra bites you, you may not feel the bite. You may not feel the sting, but it is circulating in your body, whether you realize it or not, whether you feel it or not. It's pretty terrifying right there, right? In fact, you could get bitten by a king cobra and still drive from New York all the way to Teaneck. Y'all, I'm from New Jersey. That's like over an hour. That's a long drive. Or you get a rattlesnake bite. As soon as that bite comes into your veins, it sets your body on fire. Those two different bites, those two different snakes, it really does present to us how different toxins can work in our lives. There are toxic things in our culture that can come into us that we may not even be aware of, but it is causing all sorts of chaos and disorientation and brokenness in our lives. And then there's toxins that once it gets a hold of us, we may try to break free, we may try to get away, but it's like an addiction. It's got a hold on us, and it just burns us up in our relationships as well. Guys, these things can wreck relationships. They can kill our confidence. They can dissolve our dreams. And in some cases, they can actually harm our physical health. You see, as human beings, we're composite beings. We're body, soul, and spirit. So what happens in our spirit, spiritual toxins, eventually will work its way into our bodies, into our minds, into our emotions. So that's why, guys, we're going to spend the next couple weeks unpacking what some of these toxins are and how we, through the gospel of Jesus Christ, can smash through them and find the healing and the hope that Jesus came to bring us on the cross. So today, we're going to talk about toxic loneliness. In fact, what we learn is that loneliness is a global epidemic, and we're going to talk more about that. The week after that, we're going to be talking about toxic fear, because it's Halloween. Then we're actually going to pause our series so we can celebrate Baptism Sunday. We got some folks that are going to be celebrating, going to go through the waters of baptism, who are going to be taking a step of faith to go public with their faith, which is always exciting. Then we're going to pick it back up, talking about toxic pride. How do we process our pride? And then finally, toxic shame. Now, I just got to be honest with you. There are some topics that we're going to talk about that we're going to handle very gently, very delicately. Some are kind of hard to talk about. What I would say is when we talk about things like shame or pride or fear, everything we talk about is going to be from a middle school level and up. So if you have younger kids that you're like, I don't know if I want them hearing different parts of this series, totally fine. That's why we have City Kids. Or if you're watching online, you can maybe hit the fast forward button so you can miss those spots. But here's the thing I want us to hold on to. And this is why we're going after this, because it's important. Because you are as sick as your secrets. You are as sick as your secrets, meaning this. When we allow hidden sins into our lives, hidden addictions, areas of shame, areas where we are in bondage, it literally can eat us from the inside out. You know, some snake venom actually dissolves people from the inside out. And that's literally what all of these toxins do. And so more than ever, I want you to experience the freedom that comes through Christ. The truth shall set you free. But first, it will make you miserable. So we're going to experience this together, guys. But I guarantee that we will get to the other side, and then you are going to experience the love and the mercy that comes through Christ, guys. Remember, the truth will set you free, but it will make you miserable first. But the first toxin I want to go after, because it really in many ways interacts with all the other ones, is toxic loneliness. Toxic loneliness. You know, for some of us, loneliness, we're like, I don't know if that's really an issue. Because think about it, we are in one of the most connected societies in the history of humanity. We've got cell phones, social media, WhatsApp, texting, SMS, all of that stuff. So we can literally be connected with people all the time. But even though we're the most connected society, we're also the loneliest society. In fact, former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy called loneliness a public health epidemic. Here, check this out. Cigna Healthcare, Cigna is like a health insurance company. They did a survey back in 2019 with 20,000 Americans. They discovered that 46% of Americans report sometimes or always feeling lonely. And this has doubled in the past 50 years. So I want you to understand this. This was before the COVID lockdowns. There was already an epidemic of loneliness. And then when COVID happened and things are getting locked down and 6 feet apart and social distancing, and now what we see is this pandemic has actually revealed what was already always there. This pandemic of loneliness. Now, I want to be clear here. There's a distinction between loneliness and being alone. Some of us We recharge by physically being alone. We get away from people. You know, we maybe you're an introvert and you're like, oh man, I need that alone time. It just fills me up and recharges me. Versus loneliness, which is actually an emotional state. Loneliness, it means that you can't have, you want social connections and they're not coming. And in many ways, you can be disconnected from God or other people. That's really what loneliness is. It's a disconnection. You can be in a crowd and be lonely. You could be in a happy, functional, wonderful family and still be lonely. You can be married. You or your spouse can also struggle with loneliness. And a lot of times, I know this is true for me, we don't always recognize what loneliness looks like. What Murthy says in his research, I thought this was really profound. He says this: loneliness can actually manifest in different ways with different people. It can look like irritability and anger, fatigue, reclusiveness, depression, or anxiety. We may chalk these up to other conditions or concerns, but many of these states have their roots, at least partially, in loneliness. You know, I was reading some research on loneliness, and NPR News called it a chronic ache of our age. And in many ways, I think there's a biblical idea. There's an ache for it because we're aching to connect. We're aching to recharge. We're aching to reach out, not just to other people, but even to God, to the divine. But there's something that gets in the way. There's a blockage that keeps us from reaching out and getting that connection. And eventually, it can shrivel our souls. But it doesn't stop there. In fact, Cigna Health, when they were kind of wrapping everything up, they came to this conclusion. It says this: long-term feelings of loneliness and social isolation can also reduce cognitive skills, such as the ability to concentrate, to make decisions, problem solving, and even change negative self-beliefs. And it can ultimately lead to depression. As human beings, our soul, our emotions, actually also impact our physical health. Guys, that's why more than ever, we need to smash loneliness. See, Jesus shows us how to do that. But we have to understand, how do we get there? How do we get to this place where literally loneliness is dissolving and poisoning us from the inside out? Well, this is where I want to explain to you the brutal cycle of loneliness. There is no better description to describe how this venom works in our souls than calling it the brutal cycle of loneliness. Now, this is something I actually learned from pastor theologian Bruxy Cavey. He is a Canadian guy. He is brilliant. He's another one you should add to your podcast list. But Bruxy taught me this, and I want to share that with you because I thought it was really helpful to understand how loneliness actually just perpetuates more loneliness and more brokenness. Like, this toxin is just awful in how it works. The first part of it is we feel lonely. We feel the sense of loneliness. Something triggers it. Maybe you're scrolling through social media and you see that your friends are all hanging out, but they didn't invite you to come out. And you're just a little bit like, what's up with that? Maybe you're a little irritated about it. Or maybe your kids come back after hanging out with your ex and they're just telling them what a great time they had with your ex. And your ex actually is with someone else now. And you're like, man, why can't I just move on and keep going? Or maybe you just saw that someone that you knew was single and you were friends with, and they're now married. Or you just saw someone, they just had a baby. And you just kind of feel that sense of, like, loss. That's loneliness. And as you feel that sense of loneliness, if you aren't aware of it, if you aren't able to capture it in that moment, it leads to what's called hypervigilant and critical. You become more hypervigilant. Hypervigilant means you're just hyper-aware. You're aware all the time. And so all of a sudden you're like looking through social media feeds and you're seeing what your friends are doing and you're kind of diving into the soul, and then you're getting critical. Like, oh man, typical. Of course they didn't invite me. Are they really my friends? They're just a bunch of jerks. I can't believe they'd be like that. Or maybe you start thinking like this, man, what is wrong with me that I can't move on? That my ex can move on and go out with people, but I just can't do it. I feel stuck, or I can't believe everyone's moving on with life after mom passed. What's wrong with them? See, what happens is you start to get critical about other people because really it's loneliness as a toxin that's working through your system. And then what happens is it leads to suspicion. Now, it's almost like loneliness becomes like a filter in how you see relationships. And so even neutral interactions with your spouse now take on a different feel. It's like, oh, why would they say that? That was really critical of them. Or, oh yeah, they asked me to go out, but that's just because they felt like they had to. They didn't really want to spend time with me. Or, man, there is no point reaching out to other people. Everyone's busy. Everyone's got stuff to do, or they've got kids to be with. No one has time to spend it with me. Or, it's been a really rough couple weeks. I know I'm a little extra. My anxiety's really, really through the roof. People just aren't going to want to hear about it again or be around me. And what happens is as we start to go down this cycle here, and we start to be more suspicious of other people, it actually impacts how we interact with others. Because all of a sudden we have this filter of suspicion. And now other people, they actually start to do this. They start to move away. They actually start to move away from us. Oh man, Keith's a little needy today. I think we're just going to avoid him. We're going to take the long way. You know what? I just saw Josh at church, and gosh, I'm just going to keep the conversation quick because he's so super critical. He's always complaining. I just got to keep moving. And then all of a sudden, you're back where you started at the top of the cycle. You're lonely. You see how twisted this is? How literally loneliness perpetuates more loneliness, which perpetuates more and more loneliness. This thing can kill you from the inside out, and you wouldn't even know about it. This stuff is like cobra venom. By the time you realize you've been bitten, it's too late, and you're already in trouble. So how do we get out of this cycle? So here's the good news. I do have good news. Jesus actually shows us how to smash the cycle. He defangs the power of loneliness so that we can actually find healing. He can actually reconnect us to God, and he can reconnect us with one another. Jesus shows us how to do that. So we're going to take a look at Matthew 26 to see how that happens. So if you have a Bible, turn to Matthew 26. You can follow along with me here on the screen. But Matthew is one of Jesus' biographers. He's one of the original OG disciples. And Matthew, in this section, is actually writing about Jesus' last week on earth. And you want to talk about toxic loneliness? There is so much toxic loneliness all over Jesus. He has been carrying it all week long. He's been telling his disciples, guys, my entire time on earth has been leading to this point, and they have not understood a word that he's been saying. They're like confused. They're kind of like fumbling this whole time. Jesus is in this place feeling a lot of loneliness right now because he knows that eventually he's going to go on the cross and experience the greatest loneliness of all, a loneliness that no one on earth would ever experience, and that is separation from his Father. He will cry out on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? He's going to taste the loneliness that we would never have to taste because of his love for us. So let's go take a look here and see what's happening here in this story. So verse 36 says this, Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. Gethsemane is this garden that Jesus' disciples go hang out in. And he said to them, Sit here while I go over there and pray. He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him. So Jesus had a lot of followers. He had about 150 folks who kind of hang out with him. Out of that 150, he had a core group of 12, and out of that 12, he had a core group of 3. So this was Peter, James, and John. These were his top 3. They had his 6. These were the guys that had his back. And he says this, He began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, My soul is overwhelmed with the sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. So here's the setup here. Jesus is in utter anguish. He is carrying the weight of toxic loneliness, anticipating the separation he's going to experience from his Father. And he brings in his closest friends to be there with him. Now, I want you to imagine this. Like Jesus, for his entire ministry, he would get passionate, he would get angry, he'd get sad, he'd have all the emotions. But the disciples are about to see a side of Jesus they've never seen before. Like, you ever seen, maybe your dad cry for the first time? Or imagine someone who you see as bulletproof or they're invulnerable, and then all of a sudden they show emotion for the first time. They show grief or pain or loss, and then all of a sudden you just don't even know how to respond. You're like, whoa, something's happening here. That's the moment for the disciples. And so Jesus, who's looking for comfort, isn't getting any because his disciples don't even know what to do. Because look what it says in verse 39. It says, going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will. This has got to be the loneliest time in the life of Jesus, because only Jesus can take on the sins of the world. Only Jesus is about to experience being unfairly tried, tortured. And only Jesus is going to experience the utter, complete rejection of God on the cross. No one else can do that but him. And so after this time of prayer, after he's praying and he's crying out to God, it says this, he returned to his disciples and he found them sleeping. Guys, couldn't y'all keep watch with me for an hour? You see, I find this fascinating because even in a crowd, Jesus felt lonely. Now, Jesus knew what it was like to be alone and communing with the Father, but this isn't what's happening here. Jesus is experiencing profound loneliness because he knows where this road is leading. This road is leading to the cross. This road is leading to his death. This road, as I said before, is leading to complete separation from God. Jesus is going to experience that. He's going to cry out on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus is going to feel the full effect of toxic loneliness. He feels that effect. So actually, you and I don't have to. If you have a relationship with Jesus, Jesus has removed the toxicity of that loneliness. You actually have a way out. You can smash through loneliness. And we see how he does that in three ways. He gives us three remedies in this passage. And the first is this. If you want to break through the loneliness cycle, if you want to get this toxin out, you need to normalize loneliness. Normalize loneliness. You know, I think many personality types, when we experience loneliness for the first time, we're like, there must be something really wrong with me. Because when you look on Instagram or Facebook or you watch any kind of sitcom or anything on TV, everyone's always in groups. Everyone's always happy. Everything's great. You know, everything's awesome, right? You know, you look through all those curated images on Instagram or Snapchat. And so whenever we feel lonely or we feel sad or we feel something off, we're like, oh my gosh, I feel this chronic ache. There's something wrong. I need to fix it. I'm the only one that's alone. No one else feels alone, only me. This is just me. But guys, here's the thing. Even Jesus felt lonely. Look what he says to his disciples. He goes, guys, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Would you stay here, keep watch with me? He's like, guys, I'm hurting right now. We stay with me? Will you hang out with me? Jesus wasn't afraid to be vulnerable, to share the weak and broken parts of his life. He's just like, guys, I just need you. I'm lonely now. I think this is the hardest part because so many of us, we're not used to that. We're used to things like, oh man, I'm feeling hungry. Hey, you want to go get a burger? But what if we at City Alliance Church decide, you know what? I'm feeling kind of lonely. I'm going to give Jamie a call. Like, hey Jamie, you want to go get a burger? Hey Josh, I'm just feeling a little unsettled. You want to go get coffee? That would be a huge shift in breaking through that loneliness cycle. So, you know, every other week, I get on the phone with one of my best friends. His name's Jimmy. And Jimmy and I, we've known each other since high school. He's been kind of like my accountability partner. But more than that, we just have gotten really good friends. We are brothers at this point. And I remember, you know, a couple weeks ago, he's asking me, Nithin, how are things going in your move to Williamsport, Pennsylvania? I mean, you went from New Jersey to Williamsport. How are things going? And I was like, you know, Jimmy, this place is phenomenal. Like, the people here are amazing. They're so kind. They're so welcoming. They have embraced me and our family with open arms. I am overwhelmed by just the love and the acceptance. But I don't know why I feel this way, but I feel really lonely right now. And I don't know why. And you know, many of you guys have gotten to know me by now. Like, I am extroverted. I love being around people, and you know, it's like, you know, I was telling my friend Jimmy, you know, it's great. Like, I get to, we've had people over for dinner. We've been over at people's houses for dinner. We have really felt like, you know, we are finding, you know, our home here. So I don't understand why I'm feeling lonely. And Jimmy's always got some wise words. And one of the things he said to me was, well, Nithin, maybe it's just okay just to feel lonely. Maybe it doesn't mean there's anything wrong. Maybe it's just part of the process. And you just need to acknowledge it. You see, so often when I feel things like loneliness or sadness, I try to distract myself. I try to get busy. I try to, but really, when I feel the ache of loneliness, it's God's way of reminding me to turn to Him. So if you feel the ache of loneliness, there's nothing wrong with you. In fact, it just could mean that you're a human being. Loneliness is actually part of our human condition. Jesus knew that, and He felt lonely sometimes, and He shared it. But this brings us to the next step. After you normalize loneliness, I want to encourage you to confess it to God. Jesus knew loneliness like no one else could know. And what did He do? He experienced it so that you would never have to. And guys, what so happens is when we experience loneliness, we start going through that cycle, what happens is we start looking inward. We start looking at all the things that's wrong with me or what's wrong with you, or we get critical and we get hurt. And pretty soon what happens is we create this mess all around. But the problem is we never invite God to come into our mess. Guys, Jesus wants to come into your mess. Jesus had no problem getting messy about His loneliness. Look what He says here. He goes, He fell with His face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as You will." Guys, you got to understand this. Jesus did not pray this prayer in a meek and mild way. Jesus, filled with anguish and sorrow, is on the ground, face down, saying, "God, no! I can't, I don't want to take this cup, God. Can You let it pass?" But God, no, not my will, but Your will be done. Your will be done. If Jesus can get messy in His prayer life, don't you think you can too? If Jesus can confess to God from the utter depths of His humanity, even though what He knows is the right and true and perfect will of God, and He doesn't want to do it, if He can confess that, don't you think we can too? Confess our loneliness, own our frustration, own our pain. God, I hate the fact that I'm looking on Snapchat right now and my friends are all hanging out and I'm not there. God, I hate the fact that I'm alone on a weekend. Well, my friends are partying and hooking up, but I want to honor You and honor Your word, so I'm staying home and I'm staying pure. God, it is lonely that my ex is moving on and I'm still stuck here. God, I hate this. God, I feel like my friendships have fallen apart. I feel so alone. I don't know who to trust anymore, and I don't want to put myself out there to get hurt again. Confess it to God. Don't hold back. Don't sanitize. Don't censor your prayers. He wants the whole thing. He wants to come into the messiness of your loneliness. That's the way that you break the power of toxic loneliness in your life. And you find freedom. See, Jesus knows what it's like. He knows what it's like to be lonely, to be betrayed by friends. He knows what it's like to have people run out on Him. He knows what it's like to be forsaken. And He can walk with you. In fact, He is with you in the midst of that pain. Which brings us to the third remedy. And this is the one that's going to be a little risky. This is tough. And that's this. Move toward people. Move toward people. When toxic loneliness gets injected into our souls, it creates that filter. We see people as throwing shade at us, so we want to throw shade back at them, and it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. We have a hard time trusting people when we're going through that cycle of loneliness. And we can start to get introspective, and maybe we blame ourselves, maybe we blame others, but the cycle perpetuates itself. But Jesus shows us, even in His loneliness, He moves towards His disciples. I mean, true, they didn't always handle it the best way. I mean, look what it says here. He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with Him. Jesus, in His time of deep loneliness, He grabs His boys. Now, what we know is that they let Him down. They fall asleep. He wakes them up 3 times. But I got to be honest. When I read this past week, part of me was a little bit like Jesus. Like, it's 11 o'clock at night. aren't you being kind of needy? Now, clearly, if these were Lyco students, like, they're ready to go at 11 p.m. Like, hey, the night's starting, let's do it. But here's the thing. I think Jesus was a little needy. He needed some love. He's 100% God. He's 100% man. Okay, that's what we believe about Jesus. And the humanity side of him wanted affection, wanted connection. But I think Jesus was modeling for us something that you and I are called to do in our times of loneliness, which is to move towards people. So it's a risk. We have to move towards people. But here's the beauty of what Jesus did for us on the cross. One of the things in Ephesians it tells us the purpose of the cross is to create a new humanity. Jesus created a new family for all of us to be a part of when we become followers of Jesus. And so more than anything else, in our times of loneliness, when we move towards people, it's to move towards communities of patience and perseverance. Patience and perseverance. So here's the thing. I believe this is who the church is called to be. This is who City Alliance aspires to be. We aspire to be a place where we are patient with people and we persevere with people. So we want to be a place here at City Alliance Church where we can say to you, hey, listen, I can see that you're kind of at the bottom of this loneliness cycle. You're kind of pointy and you're kind of difficult. I can sense that. I can sense your anxiety from your loneliness. And, you're a little self-absorbed. You don't ask me about how I'm doing. You're kind of complaining about how things aren't going your way. You've got that critical edge. You got some sharp edges to you, some sharp jabs and points here. But I'm not going to move away from you. I'm going to take a step towards you, even if you're difficult. Even if I'm having a hard time with you, I'm going to take a step forward because that's what family does. Family doesn't give up on one another. Family says, I'm in this. I'm going to love you. I'm going to reach out to you. I'm going to encourage you, even if you keep putting up your guards because you're still stuck in the brutal cycle of loneliness. Guys, as a church, I really believe that's who we want to be. What we don't want to be is we don't want to be a church where, all right, no thank you, next, moving on, next person. No. We want to be a people that make space for those in the cycle of loneliness to find healing, to find hope, to find restoration. And here at City Alliance Church, we create those spaces in our city groups. In fact, if you're listening to this message right now and you're not in a group, you're not connected with other believers, I want to encourage you to find that connection. If you go to our website or you talk to some of our leadership here, we would love to help you get connected into a city group because we want to hold space for you to come and bring your questions, bring your struggles, bring your skepticism and your suspicion about people. It's okay. We want to be a place where we can hold space for you because we're family. And that's what family does. We lean in and we press in. We don't move away. We move forward. That's who we aspire to be. That's our desire for you as a church. Maybe you're like, I don't know if I can do that, Nithin. The city group sounds like I'm just not there yet. Well, can you receive prayer? Maybe your first step is to let someone pray for you. That's your step to move towards someone right now. If you're watching right now, and that's you, I'd love to pray for you personally. You can email me at nithin@cityalliance.org. Send me what your prayer request is, and we'll start there. If it's just, hey, I just want to admit that I'm lonely, that's great. We'll start there. And I'll pray for you. And I'll try to help you get connected and help you break through that cycle, because we can't break this cycle alone. We need one another to do that. And that's the power of the gospel. Jesus Christ's death on the cross broke the cycle and the power of sin, including the toxic power of toxic loneliness, toxic shame. We'll talk about that in another couple weeks. But I want to give you the opportunity to receive a blessing. I want to pray over you right now, wherever you are, wherever you're watching. Holy Spirit, I just pray for my brother or my sister right now who's watching this, and they're struggling. They're in that cycle of loneliness, and they can't get out. So, Father, I pray right now in the name of Jesus that you would just break through that loneliness right now. They would break through that cycle and find hope. They'd find healing. They'd find restoration. They would find communion with you and a community to belong in. It could be an online community or an in-person community, wherever it is, God. I pray, Lord, that you would bring them into the right people. People who will say, your family. We are moving towards you, not away from you. We are not afraid of your critical edges or your just filters, because we want to embrace all of you. We ask this in Jesus' mighty and awesome name. Amen. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Come join us next week for part 2 of our series, Overcome a Toxic World. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching today's message. I hope it spoke to you and it inspired you. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. That way you can stay up to date in all of our latest messages here at City Alliance Church. And if you want to partner with us to take the gospel here, there, and everywhere, go ahead and hit the give button. Your faithful tithes and offerings help us reach more people with the good news of Jesus Christ.